Today I'm going to show you how I use Capture 120 to transform my photos of cars into shots like this. So here we are over in Capture One, and I'm going to keep this fairly brief this week. We've got 4 images that I'm going to do some quick and rough edits on, just to give you an overview of some of the tools that I use most frequently. Let's start off with this one, because I think this one already looks pretty good out of camera. It's nicely lit. It's a very light, airy scene. This was when I shot the Bugatti Chiron in Lisbon. So the first thing I'm going to do is crop the image, because we've got a lot of wasted space down on the ground and a big empty sky with not much going on. All of the interest is very much in the middle of the scene. So I think a 16:9 crop is going to be just right. It's already on 16:9, so we just bring it in and it'll pop into 16:9. And that's basically it. I do want to straighten it up though. So I am going to grab the straighten tool. I'm going to right click though, and I'm just going to drag it somewhere around here. It looks pretty good. I might even put 2.1. Do something like that. I think that looks pretty good, but I'm going to just bring that crop tool back and just adjust it something like this, so that our line of third is kind of going across here, and the car is nicely centered. I think that looks pretty good. Good starting point already. Okay, first of all, we're going to dive into the exposure, and I'm going to bring the highlights down because they are a little bit overpoweringly bright in that sky. Not loads, otherwise we start flattening out the tones a little bit too much. Somewhere around minus 47. I'm going to lift the shadows just a touch. Maybe a little bit less, just plus 20. And white balance is also quite off in this. It's got quite a purple hue to it, so I'm just going to grab that tint and I'm going to start bringing it down. Looks great about there. Maybe we could warm it up a touch as well. Just to about there. I think already that's looking quite a bit better in these tones. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. We can always just turn the before and after on and slide that. So this is before, it's quite purpley. And this is what we've got now. You know what? Maybe I actually prefer some of those purpley tones. Okay, what I'm going to do, undo that and just put a little bit more tint back in. Somewhere around there, I think, is looking pretty good. And because these are going to be quick edits, what I'm going to do now we've kind of got a really nice base image is I'm going to go straight over into our styles and presets, which we can find over here in user styles, and we've got all these different ones that Capture One makes, and they're really great starting points to kind of give you an idea of a look that you can get. Let's start with the cinematic ones, and you can just mouse over the top of these, and as you drag it down you can see that it changes the style up. Some of these have quite drastic effects. You know, this one really darkens down that blue, which I don't really think I want to do, and then we get black and white. Okay, maybe not cinematic. Maybe some of the latitude ones. I quite like these. Mossy. Let's keep mossy in mind. And again, there's no right or wrong ones to use. This is really just about flicking through and using it as a good starting point for a bit of inspiration. I think I prefer Petra to mossy, because it's sort of slightly washed out the orange tones in the building behind, which I like, because the blue of the car pops out a lot. So let's just go with Petra. We could be here all day. Actually, what I've done is I've just done something wrong. What we want to do right now, no style is applied. We want to right click on Petra and go apply to new layer. That way, when we go over to here, we can, over to our edit panel, we can see that we've got our background and we've got Petra here, which means that we can turn it on and off. But crucially, it also means that we can adjust this opacity, and this is what separates how Capture One works with presets versus how Lightroom works in presets. With Lightroom, you just apply the preset or you don't. If you want to balance it out, you've got to take it over into Photoshop where you can work in layers, whereas here, you can apply that on a new layer and then dial it back down. So maybe Petra is a little bit overpowering at 100%. So we can grab this opacity slider, bring it down to 0, and then just dial in the amount that we want. And I do think I want maybe around 80. I want it to be very noticeable, but not quite as much as it was before. So let's go on and off. It's looking pretty good. I love what it's doing to the car. Got some great colors going on in there. But now what I'm going to do is apply a new, create a new layer here, and this I'm going to call ground, just for ease. And I'm going to use a linear mask tool. This is going to let me draw in just if we press M, I'm just drawing in a straight line mask that feathers up stronger towards the bottom and feathering up towards where the car is. And with this, I just want to darken it down. I want to add a bit of darkness at the bottom of this frame that's sort of drawing the eye away from these very bright paving slabs and keeping the focus very much on the car itself. I'm just going to feather this off by dragging this handle, bringing it down here. Darkening it down even further. There we go. So now it blends in with the scene just a little bit more. So if we just turn that off and on, you can see before we've got these very, very bright tiles. Kind of draws the eye a little bit. Now it's been pulled down. I think maybe it's overpowering. So let's just bring it down to 70%. Again, even with those tools, you can bring down the opacity of that layer in order to make it blend a little bit more. You don't have to, I mean, you could go into that and then adjust the exposure, but maybe you've got several different things going on. Using the opacity, you can bring down everything that's on that layer, which is really handy. I'm now going to do another one. I'm going to call this one Sky. And with Sky, I'm again going to get another linear radial filter, and I'm going to bring this in from the top. And if we just press M again, we can see where it's applying. Now this is going to be doing some edits on this building, but I don't think this is going to be much of a problem. I want to bring these highlights down, bring that contrast up a little, maybe bring the exposure down overall. Oh, not that much. Maybe adding some clarity. I basically want to get these clouds have a little bit more definition to them. I think that's looking pretty good. Turn it off and on. So what we can see is that it is affecting this building in particular. It's darkened this down quite a lot. So I'm going to try a couple of things here. First of all, I'm going to right click and I'm going to go on to Luma range. This is going to let me tell Capture One that I only want that mask to apply to either the very bright areas or the very dark areas. In this case, this spot is darker than the rest of it, so I want to say that I don't want it to apply to dark areas. And to do that, I'm going to press Display Mask, and I'm going to drag this handle, the dark handle, upwards. And as we do, you can just notice that that red just starts to disappear from this bit of building more and more until we get to about here, just like that. That looks like it's probably enough. Undo that, apply. Now we can see that that effect has been applied, but it hasn't applied it as strongly onto this building. Still there just a little bit, but I think that blends a lot more. And that's pretty much all I think I want to do on this shot. I'm really happy with how it looks. I don't think there's loads that I would want to do. The point of this shot when I took it was that it's showing it kind of naturally in its place in the center of Lisbon. It's naturally lit. I'm not using strobes, so I don't want to do too much that kind of takes away from that real life feeling. But let's have a look at the before. A little bit dark, a little bit too purple. And what we've done using those tools is bring it into this, which I think looks pretty cool. I'd definitely been happy to deliver that as a final image. So let's move on to the next one. And I'm going to do this one next. This is one I took of the Porsche Cayenne. I was up in the Highlands of Scotland. This is the Cailescu Bridge, which if you've seen my shots, or in fact most British automotive photographers tend to go to this bridge all the time. You'll have seen it in Top Gear. It's really cool. It's in this amazing landscape, and what I like to do often when I'm taking photos of cars is to treat my car photos first and foremost as landscape photos. What I want to do is find a beautiful landscape, find an amazing scene like this bridge with the mountains in the background with these moody clouds, and then just put the car in it. Because if you just got a picture of a car and you've given no thought to its surroundings, it's not going to be a very good photo. So first and foremost, I like to make sure that I've got an amazing location. And then even if you put a car which is not that interesting, it doesn't have to be a sports car or a sports SUV like this, it doesn't have to be a supercar. Any car is going to look a lot better when you're shooting it somewhere like this. So it's always something that's worth keeping in mind. With this, I know I want to do a 16:9 again, because I want this to be quite a wide sweeping landscape. I want to bring it right up though and have the car very much kind of in the bottom of the frame. So I want to line it up with the bridge. We've got the car on sort of the bottom right thirds, and this part of the bridge is sort of going away into the top thirds. I think it looks really nice, but we do again need to straighten it up. So I'm going to right click on this to bring the straighten tool and bring it around to, I think, something like, sometimes it's kind of difficult to tell until you apply it, but I think that looks good. I think that's kind of what I wanted to do. Okay, in exposure, it's clearly quite an underexposed shot. This was taken at about, I don't know, it was just before sunrise, but it was midwinter and right in the north, so it's probably about 8 o'clock. The sun hadn't risen yet, so let's brighten it up those shadows a little bit. Not loads, because it starts to get a very flat look like this, and we really don't want that on this sort of shot. I want this dynamic moodiness. The tint is very purple, so I'm going to bring the tint down and I'm going to warm it up. Or maybe we should keep it cool, because again, that cool tones, that pre-sunrise, those blues you get, I think if you warm it up too much and you lose that, it could be any time of days. It's only by kind of keeping it cool that you keep that sunrise feel. So let's leave it somewhere around there. Already I think this is looking a lot better. We can up that contrast, we can up the brightness a little bit. And what about our shadows now? Can I adjust those a bit more? I think maybe I can. Just a smidge. Our whites. So just as I do when I've edited in Lightroom, if you've seen any of those videos, what I tend to do is grab a slider, move it up and down, and see what it does to the image before deciding on exactly where I want to put it. In this instance, it's not doing a lot, but it is adding just that extra little pop of clarity on the car itself, which I think works well. A couple of things that I want to do, first of all, is let's again go and have a look at whether there are any presets that are going to give us a nicer starting point for these edits, because I do think that we want a nice cinematic look to this shot, and I think that some of these could offer us exactly that. I know that I want to still keep it with those blues, so I'm looking at our deep forest. Let's not select that. These deep forest presets rather than the sunrisey. Sorry, not the sunrisey, like the summery sunbound, that's what it's called. Thank you. Okay, let's have a look at cinematic again. Maybe there are some cinematic ones that we could apply. I quite like 06. I quite like it as a black and white, to be honest. Let's go with 06. Let's again apply that to a new layer. Okay, it can't apply the film grain, that's fine. I don't want the film grain anyway. And let's go back over into our layers and let's add a new layer. Call this one Sky again, and I just want to add the tiniest. The colors seem to be slightly flickering, and that might just be my eyes, or it might actually be something that's happening. Anyway, I was on the Sky layer, and I wanted to bring down again ever slightly that exposure, but also boost that clarity, because as I do, look what it's doing to those clouds. Before, they're kind of a bit lifeless and a bit sort of nothing really, and as we bring that clarity up on those clouds, it really picks out the details. It's also giving some more separation on the mountains in the background. Again, you don't want to go overboard. Something like that I think looks good. Just turn it off and on, we can see what difference that has made. Using selective adjustments like this is one of the best ways that I have found to edit anything. It's when I kind of started experimenting with them in Lightroom and in Capture One, I think it was the thing that transformed how I edit the most, because before I basically just did global edits to exposure where I would just have to change everything in one go. Whereas now instead I can be a lot more selective with how I do it. Now there definitely is flickering in the colors. When I move that, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why that's happening. Maybe it's just an issue with my computer at the moment, but let's just keep going through. Oh dear, okay. Zoom out. Let's create a new layer, and this one I'm going to call car. And I'm going to try and paint in the mask. I'm going to, let me just move around. Use a much smaller brush size. I do want it feathered slightly, and I want the flow to be pretty high. And I'm going to literally press M to display the mask, paint around the edge of this car like this. It is pretty rough, but that's not to worry, and I will explain why it's not to worry in a moment. We keep on going around here, around the wheel, and then bing, like that, we can let it go. And then I'm going to go right click on here and fill the mask, and that's going to fill in around where I've just drawn, as we can see, and I can refine that by going up here, adding in a little bit more to this edge that we missed. And now I'm going to right click, and again I'm going to feather this mask because I don't want it to apply quite so much. I don't want that much of a feather, so let's build it up, something like that. And I'm also going to again go in and then refine the mask. Yeah, something like that. So it's really, really feathered it off, and that's going to allow me. That's going to mean that any effects that I'm applying is going to blend much more. It's not going to look like I've just painted in something on the car. It's going to make it look like it's much more naturally masked in place. So let's hide. What am I doing? Go back in. There we go. Let's press M to hide the mask. And now on the car, we can adjust this by pretty much by itself. So we do want to make the car a little bit brighter. I want to up that contrast, but I really want to up that clarity, because upping clarity on cars, as you can see, it really helps define those body panels. We get a much stronger line on this reflection here. It does sort of show up some of the dirt, and that's a shame. With this image, it was quite dirty because this was several hundred miles into a road trip. Often it would be good if you're doing a real hero shot of a car, or if you're doing it for advertising, you do kind of want a clean car, unless you are actually off-road, in which case fine, so mud suits the car, of course. But here I would have liked to have been able to spend the time cleaning these body panels. You can see very clearly here that it is not a clean car. There are things you can do in Photoshop to help this that I have tried to do on some of my other shots, but I'm not going to go into that in this video. We're keeping things pretty simple. So again, I think I might actually ramp the clarity all the way to the top, which is not something that I would normally ever do, but because it's quite subtly masked in here, I think it can handle it. Maybe a little bit less. Okay, let's maybe go to just 80%. Still loads, but it's not quite as much. Saturation I'm going to up ever so slightly, and the shadows I'm going to drop. The whites I'm going to raise. So now if we just go back and we just turn that car layer on and off, look how much difference that has made by using that selective adjustment. That car now looks a lot more polished. This has brought this image into looking like more of a commercial advertising image than before. The car was a little bit flat and a bit lifeless. And now we've got a much nicer looking car. So I think that has made a huge difference. A couple of other things that I do want to do. I'm going to bring in another new layer and another linear filter. I just want to darken down here just a touch, because we've got a lot of kind of dead space and these fence posts and stuff, which I don't really want in my shots. In fact, actually, let's just turn this and bring it up, because I actually think I want this going across here just to darken down this part of the bridge as well. Something like that. Again, my colors are flickering, but I am going to refine this further. I'm going to right click and rasterize. Okay, I actually need an erase mask tool. That's fine. Bigger size, low flow, and I'm going to paint it away on the water, and a much lower flow. And I'm just going to reduce it on these bits because I don't want it falling completely to black. So we just turn that off and go off and on, off and on. Yeah. Taking it away from the water is great because it wouldn't make sense that this foreground has been darkened, but also the water, it's a lot further away, so that makes more sense for the edit, and I think that overall is making this shot look quite a lot better. So the next thing I've done is add a little bit of cooler blue tones in the shadows, a little bit of orange in the midtones, and a little bit of cyan in the highlights. And I just think that's giving, if we just have a little look at the control and click before, oops, and after, it's a subtle shift. Not sure if you'll be able to see on YouTube, but it has just balanced those tones out a little bit more, which I'm really like. So I'm going to call that done on this shot, I think. Let's have a look at the before. Very, very dark, very purple. The car is really kind of lost on that bridge, and now it's been brought out a lot more. It's the shot looks a lot more cinematic. There is plenty more that I would do in this if I were to take it over into Photoshop, where I would do a lot more editing onto the bridge itself. I would try and clean the car up. But for a simple, quick edit in Capture One, I'm really happy with how this has gone. Let's move on to the next shot. Let's do the Bugatti Chiron again. This is a rolling shot, of course. This is one that I took still in Lisbon, but when we actually went out with the car on the roads. I really like this shot because we've got the car speeding down the road, but and you also see the road itself snaking away into the distance. So straight away on this, I do want to. I'm not going to crop it into 16:9. I actually like the crop pretty much as it is, aspect ratio wise. Let's just go original, but I do just want to bring it up slightly from this corner. Something like that works a lot better. And I also need to straighten it up because I feel like it is in need of straightening about like that. And already I think that looks a lot better. Let me know what you think if that was the right crop. Now, there's one thing that's always kind of ruined this shot for me, and it is this car up here in the background, because we have other cars in, and I wanted this to look like it's been the Bugatti is very much kind of on the road by itself. So let's see if we can get rid of this car in Capture One. Sometimes I find it's not very good at object removal. I tend to save this for Photoshop, but let's give it a go. So we basically just paint that mask over it. And yeah, hasn't done a great job, has it? Maybe I could have go around, mask it out, keep going over. Something like this, just to make it blend. You know what? I've been messing around with this for some time, and the ridiculous thing is that this is kind of the best I've been able to get this object removal in Capture One, and I really don't know if it's me that I just can't use the tools quite as well, or if it is actually Capture One. I don't like it. It hasn't worked. It's patchy, and when you look at it, yeah, it's only a small amount. Maybe you wouldn't be able to tell, but I can tell, and I don't want it like that. So for now, I'm going to turn this off. We're just going to carry on with the rest of the image. I'm going to do it in Photoshop and show you that one because it's a bit frustrating. It's still, Capture One is really, really good with color and exposure and with tethered shooting and with lots and lots of things, and certainly working with layers is great. But it does still lack in terms of being a full editing suite. You still very much have to pair it with Photoshop and with other tools. It's not fully standalone, but then it's not claiming to be. Neither is Lightroom, although Lightroom's object removal is better than Capture One's. It's certainly more intuitive. Okay, so we're still on this adjustment layer. Or were we? I don't know. I think we've basically... Yeah, we've started from the beginning, haven't we? Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Let's start, and we're going to do a linear filter down here. I want to darken this road. Again, drawing the eye to the car in the middle of the frame. So we're going to bring that down. Also want to bring up the clarity, because when I do, we're going to get more detail on that road. Without clarity, it's all kind of gray. As we ramp it up, it really becomes more obvious that what we're looking at is speeding concrete. You see those speeding lines. What about adding a bit of structure? Yeah, a little bit of structure too. Maybe not all the way to the top, but some just helps kind of carve out those lines. I think that looks really, really badass on this car. Cool. Right. Okay, back to our background. And what I'm going to do now is create a new layer. And in fact, let's rename this one Road, just so we know. Ooh, caps is on. This one, global, because I'm going to do some global edits on this, but I want to put it on a new layer in case I want to come back and kind of tweak it a little bit later. Okay, so here's the thing to do. When you create a new layer, it will be empty. And in order to do any editing, you need to fill it with red, like we have done now. So we can hide it. Right, now, shadows, we want to lift those shadows because we've got all these trees in the background. It's kind of falling into darkness, so lift that up. The highlights, I'm actually going to raise up a little bit, which is kind of just pinging off the windscreen of the car. I think it looks quite cool, actually. Maybe those whites I'm going to bring up a little bit as well. The clarity I'm going to leave where it is. Definitely going to leave that where it is. Okay, and now I'm going to create a new layer, fill that layer, and it's going to be called colors. So now we're going to go and edit some of the colors in this shot, and I really think that these greens don't go so well with the blue of the car. Now the car itself I don't really want to touch because most of this blue is pretty much accurate to what the car should look like. So if you're photographing a car, certainly if you're doing it commercially, you don't want to actually mess with what the vehicle looks like. Your client won't be happy. But there are some things we can do. I think we've got some purple in there, which I don't really want. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. I kind of got the impression there was a little bit of a purple shift in here. But these trees, I feel we can bring those down, warm those up a little bit, go from green more towards the yellow. We'll do the same with the yellow channel. We'll bring that down a little bit. In fact, bring it down all the way pretty much. Changing it to more autumnal tones, which I think is going to help the car pop off the screen even more. That blue against those orangey tones is going to look really, really nice. What about the oranges themselves? There's not loads of orange, just a bit here, and if we pull that down, it starts to go too red. So no, let's leave the oranges. In fact, let's push those a little bit into the greens, well, the yellows. I think something like that's looking kind of cool. Now let's do another look through some of our looks and our styles. That's pretty cool. CM05. See both of these. That blue really pops. Okay, let's go with CM06. Apply to a new layer. Apply partially. That's fine. And now we can go to our layer and just pull that opacity back to about 70%, and then we're going to go back into our layers, and let's this time apply CM05 to a new layer, apply partially, and now we've got two being applied together. And if I bring this one all the way down, then we see this one underneath, so we can build up this change in the look, something like there. So we're combining layers in a way that you just can't do in Lightroom. You'd have to go over to Photoshop, and let's do it again. Let's go. Let's close cinematic down. Let's look in film maybe and have a look and see if there are any nice filmic filters that we want to. These look pretty nice as well. Ooh, FL06. Let's add that to a new layer. Again, apply partially. That's not a problem. Pull down that opacity and then build it up. Again, I think maybe 80. And so if we start turning these off, we can just see how much of a difference it's made. This is kind of where we started from having done our base edits. Then we add in these, and every single one does its own little tweak. So it's not about just applying one preset that gives it the look that that preset provides. It's about toning it down, applying them up, building up the style that you want, trying to create an image which is completely your own. And I think that's exactly what we've done here. And now if we go before, here's what we started with. These tones don't look great. We've got dark greens back here, which sort of clashes with the car itself. And now we've got this real cinematic thing. It's like a poster, or definitely like a desktop wallpaper at least. And I think it looks really, really cool. The car looks amazing. The trees look great. The road looks cool. Yeah, very happy with how that looks overall. So let's move on and just very quickly go through our final one. Turn our before and after off. Straight away, our exposure far too dark. So we can ramp that right up somewhere quite high. We can ramp up our contrast quite a bit too. Maybe bring down those highlights and also bring down those shadows. Straight away, look at our before and after. Now the car's actually bloody visible. It's always a good start. However, our tint isn't looking good. We can certainly bring that more into the greens. And we could probably stand to warm it up a little bit as well. Cool. It's looking okay. What about a touch of clarity? Just a little bit. +6. Okay, I definitely want to bring in a linear filter, and I want to darken down this whole area here. It's right in the foreground. It's catching the eye a little bit too much. So we can bring it down, something like that. Let's just turn it, bring it a little bit further up. Okay, looking good. Let's do exactly the same thing again, but this time with the sky. Bring that exposure down, maybe up that contrast, up the clarity on those clouds. A little bit of detail, less contrast. Now let's do another one. This one, right click, fill mask. Let's just call this one colors, because that's what we're doing. And down here in the color editor, straight away, yellows, grab the hue, ramp it down. The oranges can stay pretty much as they were. As you were, oranges. I'm going to darken them ever so slightly. The greens on here, though, definitely don't want those. I can lighten them. All right, darkening this yellow. There we go. Again, I want these warm tones to go with the blue car. I want it to look more autumnal. I want it to look a little bit more fantasy, a little bit more like this amazing landscape you just want to go and drive into, like I have done here. Blue is looking a little purpley, so let's just grab the hue of the blue, bring it down, increase the lightness, increase the saturation, something like that maybe. Let's get another new layer. This time I want to use a radial filter. Let's just invert, because we are taking away, we want to do this. What I want to do with this is brighten up this wheel, up the contrast, up the clarity. We want that nice rim to really pop out. Let's just do wheel 1. Same again now on this back one. Right click, invert mask, and same again. Hide that mask, up that exposure a lot more, contrast up, clarity up. There you go. Wheels looking a lot better. Another new layer. This one, car. That one was wheel 2. I'm not good at naming my layers, but someone did comment and say you really have to, you're going to get confused. They were absolutely right. I do need to, so I am trying to be a little bit more conscious of doing that. It does just help you figure things out later on. I'm painting in some clarity, because just like we had on the other car shot on the bridge, that clarity really helps define those reflections on the car. It really helps carve out the highlights, and I want to do exactly that on this as well. So we're just brushing this in. But by having quite a low flow, only around 11, not around, exactly 11, we can sort of build it up in a way that's really natural. So I'm not worried about it looking too unrealistic. That is looking pretty good. I would do more tweaks, and certainly in Photoshop I would try and take care of some of the marks and reflections. I know they're reflections of the rocks in the car itself. There's certainly more, but look how much more these wheels pop out. In fact, the whole car looks much better defined. Let's take a look at the before. Before was dark, it was purple, the colors, the tones, everything was off. Now I think, let's just give this a try. Another new layer. This time I'm going to paint in a mask. High flow, small brush. This is going to be pretty rough. That's going to be very rough. I'm just going to go around here like this. Let go. Fill the mask, it fills in that area. We can add in a bit more just here, and then what I'm going to do, right click, invert. And now on our new inverted mask, I'm going to go down to our color editor, and I'm going to bring down the saturation of the blue, because there is a lot of blue in the sky and in the rocks as well. And I think that's kind of detracting from the car. I want the car to be the bluest thing in this shot, and at the moment it just isn't. The sky is sort of an equal blue to the car, and yet the sky is clouds. It shouldn't be that blue. It's not a blue sky. So I want to bring that down, not all the way, because it's going to look a little bit unrealistic. We want some color tone in there, but just a lot less of it. I think around -35 looks pretty good, actually. I'm quite happy with how this looks. We've got nice tones overall, good contrast on the car. Let's have a look before. Yeah, I mean, I think the difference is huge. Before, it looks nothing. The car is lost in those tones. It doesn't pop out at all. And with just a few minutes work, pretty much, we've achieved this. And that, I think, is going to bring me to the end of the video. I am going to do a couple of cleanups in Photoshop, but that, I'm really pleased with how this looks. That car looks amazing. It's certainly got a lot of dynamism to it, certainly because of the rolling road. This looks cool, and this also looks cool. So yeah, overall, I'm happy, and I'm really hoping that these tips are going to be useful, whether you're doing car photography specifically, or whether you're doing landscapes and you're just kind of wanting to figure out how some of these tools work. A lot of this you can do in Lightroom, but as I've mentioned, working in layers is something which is specific to Capture One, unless you want to then go and take your photos into Photoshop and layer it up that way. But you can do so much in Capture One. And it's well worth checking out if you haven't already. If you have enjoyed this video, do please hit that like button. It really does help. And definitely please do consider subscribing to my channel if you don't already. I'm doing a lot more stuff with Capture One as well as in Lightroom and Photoshop. Got some great stuff coming up that I really hope you'll stick around and watch. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.